this video, we are covering everything you need to know about what just happened in The Last of Us Episode 2. So, if you haven't seen the episode up to this point, make sure to subscribe with the noti bell on, like the video, share with your friends, and come back once you're done, okay? We're rolling it back in 3, 2, 1, let's go. First off, we have to cover that initial scene because it actually encapsulates my biggest theory about the show. If you remember the first episode, we had an opening monologue that set the tone for the entire show and also gave us a brief explanation of what we were going to see with the cordyceps infection. We had two scientists on a talk show in the 60s talking about what a catastrophe it would be for a cordyceps or other type of fungal infection to adapt to modern climate changes and essentially take over the world. It's a gritty, morbid look at the situation, but it ends up predicting exactly what we see during the first episode of the show and the first game with the initial outbreak. What episode 2 did is expand on that trend and set up something that we didn't even get to see in the original 2 games. Within the first couple of minutes on the show, we get introduced to a microorganisms expert from Indonesia called Ibu Ratna, who gets recruited, for lack of a better word, by the Indonesian military in order to investigate an incident. This is where we learn that in Indonesia, we also had an outbreak. One factory worker got infected and ended up getting violent with her co-workers, injuring, biting, and infecting 3 to 4 of her co-workers within that same factory, even though they were all contained at the moment of the scene. Naturally, by this point, we know that it didn't stop there, and the general lets us know that while those 4 individuals were eliminated, there were 14 infected individuals in the Indonesian country that were still left unaccounted for. Mi pana, this thing gave me goosebumps like I have never seen before. The camera work, the cinematography, as the camera pans in into Ibu's face while she's trembling and drinking her tea, realizing that the end is near. In this specific moment, both we as an audience and the scientists are realizing that there's not much hope left in this situation. And the only solutions she audibly gives the general is to bomb the entire city with everybody in it. And she requests that she have some time to go back to her family to enjoy her last minutes. I don't know about you, but I think this is a sensational deviation that we got from The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, due to the fact that for the most part, we don't get to see the preamble to the initial global infection in the game, which the show is setting up at a trend to cover in the beginning stages of the episodes, detailing the initial infection in multiple different parts of the world. So, my biggest theory, don't be surprised if in episodes 3, 4, and all the way up to 10, we get an inside scoop at how the initial cordyceps infection happened in different continents. Great piece of storytelling to start us off, and now is where everything goes off the rails. The main premise of the episode is simple. We are going through Tess and Joel's journey entrusted by Marlene, consisting of protecting Ellie and taking her to the rendezvous point with the Fireflies at any means necessary. Everything that happens in the middle can only be described by beautifully masterful storytelling. In this episode, Neil Druckmann and Craig Mason were able to get everybody involved, both gamers and newcomers alike, by having Joel, Tess, and Ellie go around the highway across the city, discussing the intricacies of living inside the QZ, what happened outside the QC, and their experience with the initial outbreak. This is exactly how you get us emotionally connected to the characters. Cool Easter egg moment: after they get off the highway, we go straight towards the hotel. This is where we get a sublime piece of fan service as Ellie unwinds at the front desk of the hotel in a scene taken shot by shot, word by word from the game. It made me smile. It was well needed because the rest of the episode just straight up broke me. Okay, important moment. Stay with me. Now we go from the hotel towards the museum, where we get one of the biggest explanations for the biggest deviation from the games. As they get closer to the Bostonian Museum, we see the tendrils that have evolved across the environment, and Joel and Tess take some time to explain what's happening to Ellie. In this version of The Last of Us, there are no spores. They are instead replaced by tendrils that connect throughout the world and are directly connected to the infected. Similar to the way that fungus operates in real life, in which the organism can spread its tendrils throughout the entire forest, ground, or whichever environment it decides to live in and communicate chemically over ridiculous distances. The show is able to use this biological phenomenon to adapt it into a storytelling vehicle perfectly. The tendrils that we see throughout the world can directly communicate chemically with the rest of the horde. Okay, in black and white, what the hell does all of this mean? Well, it means that if you directly interact, whether you step on it by mistake or whether you touch something on the wall with either a tendril or a branch that is spread throughout the world, it can communicate chemically biochemically instantly over whatever distance the cordyceps requires in order to activate the rest of the horde. Ergo, if you're in a huge city with a large population of infected people, you touch one tendril and you can have the entire city on your tail in less than 5 minutes. This change actually makes sense, and it was explained perfectly by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mason in the featurette at the end of the episode. The spores make sense from a video game mechanic perspective, but in the real world, they would spread out really quickly. This tendrils approach actually has more storytelling versatility, since in reality, you never know when a character might make a bad decision, interact with one of the tendrils, and then bam, you have an entire horde ready to go. These are the type of deviations that I was expecting, and I actually appreciate because they were well thought out and executed even better. With that said, they carefully get into the museum, and we get one of the most horrifying and tension-filled moments of the show so far. Yes, 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 you were expecting it. We have our first interaction with the clickers. As the show explains, these are infected that ended up getting consumed by the infection to the point that their eyes are no longer working, but that means that their hearing is extremely enhanced. On top of that, they use their vocal cords to send terrifying echolocation messages to the rest of the clickers in the vicinity, and of course, to identify where the prey is. These designs and prosthetics were adapted directly from the game. And another fun fact, in the featurette, we also get an inside scoop at the fact that the actors that were playing the clickers were fans of the game, so they were clearly emulating the mannerisms and the vocal sounds to a point that they were taken exactly from the video game. Bone-chilling scenes, familia. The tension, the sense of hopelessness, and the sense of despair were palpable. I have to say, hats off to Anna Torv, Pedro Pascal, and Bella Ramsey because they acted their butts off during this last section of the episode. As expected, they do survive, and we ended up getting thrusted straight into the Capitol building scene. If you've played the games, you know the tears are about to roll. Again, one final mega spoiler alert because this is the most important part of the episode. Tess and Joel are finally successful. They're able to get to the Firefly rendezvous point where they're supposed to exchange Ellie for supplies, cars, and all of the gear that they need in order to search for Tommy in the wilderness. As expected, that does not happen because they realize that as soon as they get into the Capitol building, they realize that the Fireflies have been raided and everybody was sent on permanent vacation. Joel gives up. He basically says it's time to wrap up, go back to the QZ and try to sneak in and avoid the Fedra. Tess, on the other hand, is uncharacteristically saying no, this is her last stand, that is not her home, she's going to figure it out on her own. As soon as the red flag is raised, we know exactly what just happened. It turns out that she got bit at the museum. And unfortunately, since it was in the neck area, she only has a couple of minutes before she's completely gone. Joel has to make a tough decision to leave Tess and take Ellie, but we have an expedited decision because one of the infected gets up, they put it down, and the tendrils do their work to contact the rest of the horde. At this point, both Joel and Ellie begrudgingly decide to escape without Tess as she's able to throw some gasoline on the floor with a couple of grenades in an attempt to burn the building and confuse the infected. In a beautiful twist, the infected actually get into the building, but they completely ignore Tess because they already identified her as part of the horde. She is already infected. Then, in one final heroic and disturbing moment, one of the actual infected recognizes Tess and decides to finalize her turning in the most heebie-jeebies way possible. He steps up right up to Tess and then kisses her in order to spread the mycelium faster and have her turn quickly to help the horde. You can see the pain and the horror in her eyes, but she's able to grasp out her last bit of humanity, turn on the lighter, and burn everything to high heaven. This was gut-wrenching, fam, but as you might have expected, it deviates from the game slightly. Because yes, while she was bitten in the game, it is Fedra that ends up raiding the Capitol building, and her last stand is shaped in the form of a shootout with the military. Regardless, I think this sacrifice hits even deeper. In my opinion, it's an even better catalyst to set up Joel and Ellie's journey as a solo crew. This is the moment that Pedro Pascal's character has to fully commit to Ellie, and she has to trust him as her protector. So, what are the 3 biggest lessons that we got from The Last of Us Episode 2? Numero uno, the departures from the game are actually well justified. From what we've seen so far, Craig Mason and Neil Druckmann are using the games as a base model and are adapting some certain changes to make sense in a way that the TV show narrative is able to work. It may not be perfect for hardcore gamers that were expecting a one-to-one direct video game adaptation to live action, but it's working worked for me so far. Numero dos, the story beats are actually almost exactly the same. Kind of connected to lesson number 1, the mainline story beats that we appreciated in The Last of Us Part 1 and 2 are being adapted almost identically, with strong acting, amazing action set pieces, and a deep emotional punch. I expected them to make some heavy, stark differences when it comes to the dialogue and the story progression, but it's actually been pretty faithful to the adaptation of the original, so it actually makes me pretty excited for the rest of the season. And 3, the production value is definitely there. When it comes to the production design, the quality and execution of the prosthetics, as well as the little nuances and details hidden throughout the world that are similar to the video games. This script, the acting, and everything else on the production side were made with true passion, and you can notice that from the jump. The next episode is dropping on January 29th on HBO Max. And from the people that saw it early with press passes said that episode 3 is one of the most important ones in the entire show. So, next Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, and 9 p.m. Eastern, you can expect me to be in my seat and watching this show. So, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stick around because I'm gonna be dropping another video just like this explaining everything that happens in episode 3. See ya!